My moment of impact is that when I was younger, I almost lost someone really close to me, and the standard treatment options were not viable, and they didn't know what else to do until they discovered personalized medicine. And that really sparked my interest in wanting to develop personalized, tailored treatment options for patients.
Hello, and today's impactful guest is Nisha Janamanchi. Nisha is currently an analyst at HealthScape Advisors, which is part of the Chartis company. She is a 2025 bioengineering graduate from the Grainger College of Engineering at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Nisha is a Gen Z leader seeking to make an impact through science-based innovations in the area of precision medicine, pharmacokinetics, and related fields. She joins us today from her home base in Chicago. Nisha, we are so honored to have you on the podcast today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It is our pleasure. Okay, audience. Today, Nisha and I are going to touch on topics that are so fascinating around the convergence of AI with biomedical engineering and pharmacokinetics. Essentially, how the promise of personalized medicine, also known as precision medicine, is opening up new possibilities for treating disease and promoting wellness. We'll be talking about why precision medicine is so compelling for future healthcare breakthroughs, how a single summer internship can ignite a career passion, and the steps that Nisha took to build her education in the direction of her dreams. Importantly, here you have a unique opportunity to learn from a Gen Z leader who's actively navigating how to transition from undergraduate experience into the full-time world of work. Nisha has distinguished herself in bioengineering, biomedical engineering, and computer science. And she has a lot of insight that can help any young person trying to build a career in the STEM fields. As you listen to Nisha's story today, think about what parts resonate with you. How can you apply some of her discovery process to your own life and work? And ask yourself, are you moving in the direction of your dreams? If so, keep going. And if you're not, maybe think about how to course correct. If you're a parent or know someone who's considering STEM fields, this is a can't miss episode. So be sure to share it with them. And Nisha and I want to hear from you. So tell us what you think at katy@katyhansell.com. All right. Without further ado, Nisha, what is your moment of impact?
My moment of impact is that when I was younger, I almost lost someone really close to me, and the standard treatment options were not viable, and they didn't know what else to do until they discovered personalized medicine. And that really sparked my interest in wanting to develop personalized, tailored treatment options for patients. And that is my moment of impact.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That must have been, you must have felt so helpless watching them suffering and not responding to the standard treatment protocols. What did that feel like for you?
Yeah, that was definitely a difficult process where I feel like it commonly occurs where doctors just go after and recommend the most standard level of care, but each patient is so different at a biological and molecular level that I think it's really important to take into consideration the people's genetic background and how they respond to a specific disease to create treatment options. And that's what ended up happening in this case, and they were able to deliver a life-saving, personalized approach.
So is the person close to you thriving?
Yes. they're doing great and have not been in they've been in remission ever since.
I love hearing that. So what stage were they at when the medical team was able to pivot them from the standard protocols that weren't working to a more customized approach for their genetic makeup? How far along were they?
So this was cancer, and I don't think it had metastasized yet, so it was still early stages, maybe stage 2. So it is important that interventions are performed earlier rather than later, especially when you're doing a personalized approach. So you can be the most aggressive you need to be at those early stages.
Yeah. So how old were you when this shared experience happened?
I was very young. I was around 7 years old. So these are all things that I've learned as I've grown up and sparked an interest in this field. And this person has shared about their experience to me. So I wasn't necessarily living through it and really understanding at the age when it happened what exactly they were going through, but I was able to learn after the fact it had happened.
Mm-hmm. So let's just talk a little bit for the audience generally about precision medicine. Maybe I'll set it up kind of at the layman's level, and then you can come in and add some color and texture to it. So the way I've had it described to me is we can move away from trial and error medicine, away from one-size-fits-all medicine, and we can start to look at someone's unique genetic makeup, their unique DNA fingerprint of you and the disease, right? How would you describe personalized medicine?
Yeah, I think you started it off really well, really focusing on the fact that personalized and precision medicine is essentially about tailoring treatment to the individual instead of using that one-size-fits-all approach. So instead of saying that everyone with this disease gets the same drug, it looks at things like your genetics, your environment, your pre-existing conditions, and how your body responds to a disease. And the goal is to find out what actually works best for you and not what works on the average individual, because the standard treatment is designed to work for a majority of people, but in reality, people are biologically very different.
Fabulous. So I've heard it said that it's a tailored healthcare approach that uses each person's genetic, molecular, and environmental profile, not just for treating disease, but also on the front end for prevention and for diagnosing. And it also enables targeted therapies, reduces side effects, and enhances treatment efficacy. So, what would you add to that?
Yeah, like it really takes into consideration, like holistically as a person, your entire profile and every aspect of who you are. And also pairing that with analytical and technological tools such as AI, where you could potentially give models clinical trial data sets where they are trained on this data of patient makeup and past clinical trial results to then predict how a patient with a similar genetic profile would respond to a specific therapy. So there's a lot of future and potential in this field, and it's only the beginning.
It's only the beginning, and you are such a person who has applied AI to clinical data sets and looked at outcomes, and we're going to get into that. So I thought maybe we could take like a specific example of breast cancer. I think most people listening will have been touched in some way by breast cancer. And we can talk a little bit about the promise of precision medicine with breast cancer. So maybe I'll start it off. So it was interesting for me when I read that, so every breast cancer starts in the tissue from one cell, but then the cells differentiate. So your cancer cells are not monolithic. They're all really different. And each cancer has its own genetic identity. So you as a person have, and I hope you're going to correct me where I get it wrong. You as a person have your own genetic identity. And then the cancer has its own DNA fingerprint, its own identity, right? And so the tumor biology that's unique to the person will drive what treatment is going to work. So we kind of start off with breast cancer, this giant category, and then we have invasive and non-invasive. 70% are invasive. And then we go down to where your training is at the molecular level, and we think about at the hormone receptor level, what's like positive and negative, and the HER2 protein level, which is what causes the cells to grow. Is the person positive or negative their cancer? And then there's actually intrinsic molecular types beyond that, luminal A, luminal B, and so on. But this tumor biology will actually drive the treatment plan. So the tools that oncologists have are surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, hormonal therapy, immunotherapy, targeted therapy. And now we can say what tools make sense based on the genetic makeup of the cancer, how those cells are presenting, and what the heterogeneity of the tumor is. So over to you.
Yeah, I think that was really great context and like really helpful background for a listener. I feel like you queued it up really well. And I think specifically with breast cancer and tumors, cancer is so nuanced and complicated, and still no one truly understands the underlying mechanisms and the root causes of it. And so cancer is one disease, but it's also hundreds of different diseases and mutations at a molecular level. So the specific mutations in someone's tumor can change how aggressive it is and also how it responds to different treatments. So step one is really understanding those mutations, where they occur in your DNA, and what pathways they're triggering downstream. And so two patients could both have breast cancer, but their tumors might behave completely differently because of their genetic differences. So that's why understanding those mutations is so important for choosing the right therapy and identifying which therapy is going to be best for that patient, whether it needs to be a more aggressive approach, or if you're able to take a step back and not use an as aggressive approach because they have a different underlying, or they have a comorbidity where that chemotherapy might trigger another pathway in their body and might not be the most effective treatment.
Yeah, the more I learn about it, the more complicated it is. And it's all the cases are so different. So I thought it was interesting to find out that there's this Oncotype DX genetic test that helps you figure out, are you actually going to benefit from chemotherapy, or how are you going to benefit, maybe is a better way to say it. I'm sure you'll set me straight. And also, like, what's the probability that you're going to have a recurrence? So it seems like we're learning about what therapies are going to work. And also, we can start subdividing who is this going to work for and who is this really, they're going to suffer the effects of chemotherapy, but they're not going to get the benefit. So I thought that was such an interesting that there's these specific tests. Like I think we've all heard about the BRCA1 and BRCA2 hereditary genetic testing, but I was reading up to talk to you and I learned this and I was like, wow, that's such a great thing that you can find out before someone goes through chemotherapy. Is it even going to work?
Yeah, that's definitely really interesting in how they're creating so many more tests to really categorize patients into different groups to identify what that best treatment option is going to be. And I think it's just more like collecting more data about who you are as an individual, like this test. Are you going to respond in are you going to respond efficiently to chemo or not? So it's just another data point that people can consider in creating that tailored treatment plan for the patient.
Awesome. So, talk to us a little bit about something. You had a really cool internship and you were working in physiologically based pharmacokinetics. And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was my second internship going into my senior year of college, where I was working at a large pharmaceutical company in their pharmacokinetics department. And so my project that summer was working on developing a virtual population of patients with both hepatic impairment and cancer. So the dynamics of that comorbidity population and identifying how drugs are going to metabolize differently in both patient populations. And so instead of this being more lab-based, which is what my first internship experience was, this was more computational and analytical, and I was really looking at the biology of behind how drugs are processed in the body, and then also using modeling to predict how different factors like liver function or disease state could impact drug exposure. And so this work was pretty late in the drug development pipeline, which is an important consideration where the drug has already been approved. And then our work was understanding how the drug actually metabolizes in the dynamics in people's body. And so we would design clinical trials and the dosage. And so that was kind of like a personalized aspect where we were looking at the differences between population groups and how they would respond to the drug. And we could tailor the drug dosage and different drug dynamics between different like other drugs that patient population might also be taking. So it was a really cool experience where it was so interdisciplinary, where I got to really combine biology, math, and analytics, and it felt very applied and impactful and made me really realize that this is the kind of work where you're using data and modeling to inform real clinical decisions is something that I could really see myself doing long term.
Beautiful. So, what is the variability of how a drug moves through the bodies? Like, can you describe maybe two different cases that would then influence different dosing or the application of the data? How do you think about the drug moving through the body and how that informs the dosing?
Yeah, so in this specific situation on my project, we were looking at the dynamics between hepatic impairment and cancer. And so the different population groups we were looking at were different severities of hepatic impairment, where there was like stage 1 versus stage 3. So stage 1 would be able to metabolize the drug a lot more quickly and efficiently versus stage 3. So you would tailor the dosage to, there's also like fast release versus later release drugs. So you could tailor the drug dosage and drug type to respond differently in different patient populations depending on their conditions. So like stage 1 would get a more aggressive dosage because they are able to metabolize it faster, but then might be like a faster release versus a stage 3.
Okay. That's really helpful. And by hepatic failure, is that liver failure or hepatic
Yeah.
challenge, liver challenge?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think you talked earlier about the interdisciplinary nature of that summer internship that you had in physiological-based pharmacokinetics, and you were applying math and computer modeling and computational tools. So what do you see as the promise with precision medicine? Now we have this whole suite of AI tools to leverage the whole process. And we've got CRISPR technologies for gene editing. You know, we've had like for a decade or more the human genome mapped. So talk about like how AI is going to leverage and help these disciplines converge for the to solve future problems.
Yeah, I definitely think that's like a huge hot topic and something that I'm really interested in too, seeing like how AI can benefit and accelerate the work that precision medicine is doing. And I think like one use case of it is something that like I kind of talked about earlier, where you can train different data sets using clinical trial data, where it can start to recognize patterns in the data based on patients and how they respond to a different therapy. So, for example, if I gave it my genetic makeup, my pre-existing conditions, it could potentially map my genetic profile to the most common individual in that clinical trial data set, understand how they responded to different therapies, give you like a percent probability of how effective it's going to be. And then still on the back end, like that human validation of checking the therapies that it gives you, like, is this truly going to be an efficient option? And then collaborating with physicians to then identify, based on like their experience with the specific patient, how you can leverage the data from AI and then leverage the analytics done by like the computational biologist, and then also leverage the patient interaction with the physician to create the best treatment approach.
That was an incredible answer. And I'm very excited for the day where it doesn't seem that far away now, just listening to you talk about the developments in the field that you've seen and you've applied, where our electronic health record will actually have our whole genome mapped and everything in there. And we'll just have all this type of information where people can simulate different targeted therapies, and we can have a consultation and be involved in it. I love this principle of like the right treatment, the right dose for the right person at the right time, that we're going to be able to do instead of having this trial and error process. All right. So anyone listening, with the state of AI and other tools right now, the time is ripe for personalization of medicine transformation. So if you are contemplating a career in science or medicine, consider these interdisciplinary fields where you can be an active part of treating and modeling disease to help patients and expand the set of protocols for people. All right, so let's go back in time. Can you time travel with me, Nisha?
I will try.
All right. So how old would you say you were when you first decided that science is cool?
I think pretty early on, like I remember loving math in elementary school, and then I feel like we got some real exposure to different fields of science in middle school, and I loved like understanding the different layers behind it, and I have always been drawn to both math and science and like the problem solving aspect, and that you had to really walk through challenges to figure things out, to really understand like the underlying root cause of problems. And it wasn't, but at the end of the day, I also did like that it was a puzzle, but then in math that it was black and white, that there was like a clear right answer. That like clicked in my brain for me.
Awesome. I guess until you got to like your PhD at MIT where it's all super, the math goes super abstract on you, right?
Yeah.
So I raised three kids who I just remember each time they came home from Science Olympics where they got to mix Coca-Cola with Mentos. And you can you can simulate a volcano exploding when you drop the Mentos into the Coke. So were you involved in any like science type activities as a young person, like middle school age, or any organized activities like that, or you just really love the science curriculum at your school?
I think like who doesn't love the Mentos and Coca-Cola experiment and like the volcano? I feel like that's definitely a pivotal moment in every kid's education. But I don't think I was involved in too many like extracurriculars that were science based like in middle school, but yeah, just definitely like loved all of my classes and everything that I learned that was science based.
You crush high school and you're looking ahead to university. How did you decide to go to the fabulous University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign?
Yeah, so growing up in Illinois, like you always hear about U of I and how it's such a strong engineering and STEM focused school. So it was definitely one of my top choices, and the bioengineering department there is great. And so, like I was saying, throughout my childhood through middle school and high school, I was always really drawn to both math and science. And as I got closer to college, I realized I didn't want to give up one for another. So I really liked understanding how the body works at a deep biological level, but also didn't want to lose sight of the quantitative and problem solving side that comes with math and analytics. And that's what really led me to bioengineering. And it felt like the perfect intersection of both. And very happy with my decision going to U of I. Could highly recommend to anyone.
I love hearing it. I know so many people who got the world's greatest education there and made lifelong friends. So I was peeking at your LinkedIn, which is fire, to get ready to talk to you. And I was really, really intrigued. You were a research assistant in Professor Sergei Maslov's computational biology lab. And you just talked to us a little bit about computational biology in terms of your internship and also being leveraged with AI, looking at clinical data sets and thinking about predictive modeling. So can you just start out maybe and explain what is computational biology?
Yeah. So computational biology is really that intersection of biology and analytics where you're taking biology and really trying to understand the root causes of diseases or any biological pathway at a molecular level, but then you're given so much data that the analytical aspect is very crucial for identifying those patterns in the data. So I think it's really about how you can leverage analytical tools to draw actionable insights from the data and have a key biological takeaway.
Fantastic explanation. So, what level in your studies did you have to get to before it made sense for you to be part of a lab like that? Like, did you have to be a junior and have completed certain coursework? And can you share like a project that you worked on there?
Yeah. I think there isn't like a black and white answer of the level or classes that you need to take to join a research lab. It really depends on your interests. But I think for me in this specific lab, it was important that I come with some computational and coding background, and I was working towards receiving a CS minor. So I joined this lab halfway through my sophomore year. So I definitely had taken, I think, around 3 CS focused classes and developed those foundational skills. And then also in your freshman and sophomore year, you're really taking like those core like 101 classes in science and calculus and differential equations and really building your foundation. So I think that was a really good time to then be able to apply those skills to a more tangible and focused area. And so a specific project that I did in this lab that was really cool is that we were working on training neural network NLP models to predict how to make the gut microbiome more stable.
Wow.
So I was working with a PhD student, so he was doing a lot of the work and I was just assisting him where he needed assistance, but definitely learned like what the project was as a whole and then how I could contribute in any ways that I could. And so they were using very, very large genomic data sets. And so I was helping in filtering those to be able to understand that data better. And so that, and also creating like different charts and models to segment the data in different ways to draw key insights. And then also we had to understand at a biological level how different microbes interact with each other.
Hmm.
And so we were then training this model based on those interactions, how to make the environment as a whole more stable.
That's so fascinating. I think everything we're learning about the gut biome and the amount of intelligence in the gut biome is so fascinating. So we're going to have you come back on for that. Season 4. I advise a lot of young people heading off to university, and I always tell them, think about these very important 3 words, and they are internships, internships, and internships. Because internships offer you a chance to apply what you're learning. They also offer you a chance to expand your network, peek into what careers are going to be like. I think one of the ways that you navigated your education so well is that you were really involved in very significant clubs that you just discussed and labs and in your coursework. And then you also use your summers to have really fascinating, I find them fascinating, internships. I'm really interested to hear you share about them. We talked a little bit about the one you had when you were a rising senior, where you did the hepatic failure and cancer modeling. But let's hear a little bit about what you did when you were rising junior at Dren Bio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would love to talk about that. So that was my very first internship, and Dren Bio was a small startup biotech company where I was working as a research and development intern, and it was primarily a lab-based role. So I spent a lot of my day-to-day culturing cells and running different experiments to test how different antibodies activated a specific receptor tied to a new drug pathway. And this was a really valuable experience because, like you said, it was my very first time applying what I had been learning in my classes to a real world setting. And instead of just learning about those biological pathways in class, I was actually able to test how a potential therapy works at a molecular level and how that could eventually translate into improving patient outcomes. And so at the same time, I also learned something really important about myself. While I enjoyed understanding the science and the intent behind the therapy, I also realized that being in a fully lab-focused role isn't necessarily what I saw myself doing long term. And so I think this is also a very underrated aspect of internships where you not only figure out what you do like, but you also really figure out what you don't like. And I really realized that I don't want to be in a lab focused role, but I did love the science. I just want to be able to apply it in a more analytical and strategic way. And this experience was also so valuable where it gave me a really strong foundation in early drug development at that initial research stage. And that was especially helpful in my next internship where I was working on later stage drug development. So it gave me a really good understanding of the full life cycle that a drug goes through from early discovery to later down in the pipeline and all the steps that it takes to get there.
Fantastic. And you are so right that it's really hard to know what jobs are like until you try them out. And some of the environmental and social aspects of jobs that are a good fit or not a good fit. And so you were able to learn a lot, have knowledge that served you in your next internship, having a broader context, but also know how to deselect certain environments that weren't going to be as interesting to you as others. So really well said. I think that's great. Nisha, for anyone listening or anyone in their families or friends who are trying to get an internship, what advice would you have?
My advice would to just keep applying and use every connection you have while you're really starting your career. And I also will say, like, don't be too picky about your internship. Like, any experience is good experience. When you think about it, like, you're winning because you're gaining new experience, new opportunity, and just having something to speak to and having something that you worked on. And you can also translate even if it's something that you're not specifically interested in long term and you know that right off the bat, you can always spin that experience into something that you are interested in. And just having that background and experience is so valuable to speak about. So just stick in there. I know it's a really tough process, but any experience is worth it.
Beautifully said. And thank you for sharing that because I think it's true. Sometimes jobs or experiences are adjacent to what we want to do, but we're still building those transferable skills, right? We're still learning how to upward manage, how to function in teams, maybe corporate teams that are different than science or university teams. It's always helping us to up level to get the next thing. So I really appreciate you saying that. Also, for anyone who is attending university, it's probably easiest in a relative sense. I'm not saying it's easy, but in a relative sense, to work for a faculty member than to go find an external internship. So one of the things that I think is so wise about how Nisha navigated her educational journey is she volunteered at that Maslow lab, working with that PhD student, helping, work through the models, given the massive data sets and setting them up and leveraging them. So I think it's really important to reach out to your faculty, make a faculty friend, and say that you're available. If you can swing it during the year and still manage your course load, then that's great. But sometimes they'll even take you on for the summer, and you'll never know if you don't ask. All right, so let's skip ahead to... You're getting ready to graduate with this fantastic education. You graduate in May 2025. What tips do you have about how to land a job? Because it's actually 2025 and 2026 are remarkably challenging job markets for young college graduates. The unemployment rate overall is hovering between 4.3 and 4.4%. But for college graduates from wonderful universities, it's like 7.1%. And it's really tough. And AI is displacing a lot of entry-level computer science jobs. A lot of the things that we've never seen before are being thrown our way. So what tips do you have, Nisha, for someone who's thinking ahead to the spring, trying to find a full-time job? And then we'll pivot and talk about your full-time job.
Yeah, I think similar to what I was saying with landing an internship, I know it's really rough out there. I lived through that. I think just keep applying, stay motivated, and use every connection you have. Try to network as much as you can. And I feel like that sounds like a broken record. Like I heard that so many times and it does get frustrating. But I think the most important part is to really just get that initial first step through the door. I feel like I would apply to hundreds of jobs and would just get no response. But once you finally do land an interview, it's so important that you really nail it and you follow up and you're really prepared for those rare opportunities where you do get a response. So and also, like I was mentioning before, like any experience is good experience. If you don't land a full-time job right away, like do an internship and maybe they'll have like a return offer off of that, or you're able to pivot to something within that company in a different department that has an opening. Like just having that initial first step in the door, even though it might not seem something that's optimal for your situation, is really important.
The thing is, people are often beaten down by the process, by all the rejection. So they go into that first in-person interview already kind of like beaten down a little bit and maybe a little bit defensive. And you got to get rid of that. You got to bring your, hitting the microphone. I feel so strongly about it. You got to bring your A game. You got to, read the company website. You got to think about how you can add value. You got to come up with those questions that express things you're truly interested in, that you could engage in dialogue with them on the answers. Do your homework, people, because that's your gateway through once you get that first interview. So Be
Yeah.
prepared. You heard it from Nisha and you heard it from me. All right.
Yeah.
So you have a fabulous job now. You're an analyst at HealthScape Advisors, which is part of the Chartis company group. Tell us about your new role and what do you do?
Yeah. So like you said, I'm an analyst at HealthScape Advisors, which is a health insurance consulting company. And so this is my first time in the world of consulting, and a lot of the day-to-day work is on client engagements where we're in client-facing roles and having like a project where you're creating strategic recommendations and doing different analyses to develop those recommendations. And and so like I spoke a little bit about my background of my interest in working in personalized medicine. So this isn't directly aligned with that long-term goal, but it's been a really valuable experience in different ways. And I've been developing a lot of those transferable soft skills that I know that I'll be able to use anywhere. Things like presenting and communicating complex ideas clearly, and critical thinking and problem solving, and how to be given a task and work on it independently and know when to escalate, and just those real transferable skills that can be used anywhere. And I've also been exposed to the business side of healthcare, which is something that I didn't really have experience with before, and something that I didn't really see myself having a career in college. I didn't really join any consulting clubs or really expose myself to that business side. But I'm realizing that I actually really love the collaborative aspect of consulting and working on teams and working through problems together. And so even though the content itself isn't exactly what I want to do long term, it's helped me realize that I really do like being at the intersection of science and business. And I could see myself being in a more strategic focused role in the future where I'd potentially help guide decisions on like different drug pathways to target and develop, or different areas to invest, where I'm still using that science background and connecting to science, but then tackling it through a more strategic and business focused lens.
Beautiful. That's such a great description of what you're gaining from this experience. And, consulting roles are such a wonderful way to really hone pattern recognition. I know we've got our AI tools that help with pattern recognition, but you're also directing the AI tools, right? And really honing that skill and applied problem solving in groups, and then being able to bottom line things and tell people not only what your insights are, but why they matter, and more importantly, what they should do about them. So consulting is fantastic training, even if you want to go on and have a completely different non-business role in the future. So I really appreciate you sharing that, and I agree with everything you said, 100%. So we're starting to run out of time, but there's a couple of things I definitely want to get into, so maybe a few rapid fire questions. What do you say?
Sounds good.
Okay, so you are young and you are a woman. Do you have any other advice for young women who want to pursue careers in AI? Or you also have a minor in computer science. You use AI in your education, use it in your internships, and you used it in your job. So, it's sometimes challenging to be the youngest person in the room, maybe one of the only women in a room in a highly technical environment. So I was wondering if you had any advice to other people.
I would say that like being in a technical field, like really know what you're talking about and really like have a strong grasp and understanding of the tools that you're using, such as AI, and how you are leveraging that in your own way to accelerate the work that you're doing. So you can help AI like do the busy work, the grunt work for you, so then you can really focus on the true insights and what really matters and really being able to communicate those insights in an effective way. And so, yeah, I would just say really having a strong grasp and understanding of a task end to end and how you can leverage tools to make your life easier, and then taking those key insights and takeaways and being able to present them in a key matter.
Fantastic. So, Python, Java, C++, MATLAB, a whole bunch of simulation, computational programming languages. What would you advise young people who are studying computer science now with what's happening with vibe coding and AI? Do you think they should still be studying computer science? Like, what are your thoughts?
So I feel like I can't really speak to like, should
Okay.
you study it or not,
Yeah.
because I actually like do not particularly love like the coding aspect. So I'm actually very excited about the future where AI can do the very technical coding aspect, and then me as an individual can actually use the outputs and the takeaways of the data to really extrapolate that into the findings that I want. So I'm excited about the future and capabilities and how good it is at coding, because I think it is very crucial to have at least a minor or some kind of education in it so you understand the syntax and how code works, where you are able to troubleshoot the code, and like if AI is doing it for you, you have an understanding of the mechanisms of it and how you can ask it to do different things. So having a strong foundation in it, I think, is really important, but then having a unique interest of how code and AI can apply to it is really important as well.
Gotcha. All right. So we always close on the same question. Nisha, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is that I think biology is progressing faster than it ever has due to the accelerated impact of technology and AI. And I feel like as a society, we consistently hear about the harm AI is doing. Like you mentioned, like displacing jobs and hurting the environment, and where people just aren't using their brain for day-to-day tasks. But I think in the world of biology and healthcare, where it is so complex and there haven't been improvements in solving diseases, I think that this really is going to make a huge impact in how we can accelerate research and how we can make a big difference in patients' lives by just having a better grasp and understanding of biological data.
So profound. I like to co-sign that. And, AI is a really key tool in the promise of personalized medicine, which we spent the first part of this conversation discussing how we're going to soon move to the point where there are unique protocols for unique patients, and AI is going to be an important part of that discovery process. So I really want to thank you so much, Nisha, for talking to us today. I'm so happy to learn from you, hear all your insights and watch how you've navigated your education, your career journey. And I have to say, I was very sad to see what happened with the federal layoffs in basic science and applied science at the NIH, the CDC, over 2025 and 2026. And it really makes me feel great that there are young leaders like yourself focused on innovation to help promote health and wellness and leveraging all the interdisciplinary tools. So I'm very excited, and thanks for being part of making this a brighter future for all of us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So today you got to hear from someone who had a formative experience when someone close to her became ill and wasn't responding to the standard protocols. Nisha saw firsthand the power of personalized medicine to precisely intervene and create health and wellness. This new awareness of the promise of precision health informed her educational journey and her career. Each chapter in your career may not be centered squarely in your biggest passion at all times, but as Nisha said, each chapter builds and develops you into the leader who will be needed. So sometimes you need to get a job and learn in it, contribute, even if it's adjacent to your passion. Trust that you're acquiring skills, leadership traits, and expanding your network so you can move closer into your passion in the next role. We heard how Nisha put herself into activities and internships where she could learn and contribute. And these experiences massively scaled her understanding of the ultimate through line of her career. So don't ever let fear hold you back. Raise your hand and get into the arena. Ask for help. Invest in your own learning and make it happen, because the world needs more leaders who are passionate about what they do. Thank you, Nisha Janamanchi.